Rachel Zegler, the name once synonymous with Hollywood's next big thing, a prodigy handpicked by Steven Spielberg. But something shifted. Her supposed grand return to the stage, wrapped in elegance and applause, exploded into chaos just minutes into the debut of Evita. Audiences weren't cheering, they were walking out. Some demanded refunds, others called it a scam, and when one of Britain's most respected actors, Sir Ian McKellen, publicly called the whole thing ludicrous. The internet knew this wasn't just a flop, it was a warning. A viral storm that exposed what critics are now calling one of the most out-of-touch performances ever seen on the West End stage. Before a single note was even sung, the controversy had already begun. Patrons who showed up to London's prestigious Palladium Theatre for Evita were greeted not with fanfare, but with a sign. One that warned of loud music, haze, strobe lights, and themes of a political nature. At first glance, it seemed like a standard precaution, but for many, especially theater purists, the warning felt like something else entirely, a red flag. Almost immediately, critics and attendees began labeling it the latest in a growing trend of what they called woke theater. Sensory warnings, political disclaimers, and emotional cautions that critics say turn powerful art into soft, sanitized messaging. It wasn't just random audience members raising eyebrows, either. Sir Ian McKellen, one of the most respected voices in British theatre, publicly called the warning ludicrous. In his words, theatre is meant to challenge you. It's supposed to provoke, inspire, even shock. So why the need for a warning sign? Social media quickly latched on to the moment. Memes spread across X and TikTok. One viral tweet read, "Imagine warning people that Evita, a musical about a controversial political figure, might be political." Another joked, "Theater in 2025. Come for the art, stay for the disclaimers." Yet, some defended the production, arguing that the warnings were simply part of a new era, one that respects neurodiverse audiences and gives viewers a heads-up about intense content. Still, others weren't convinced, especially since those very themes of a political nature turned out to be not just intense, but front and center. What happened during the actual performance, though, would take things to a whole new level. Just as the backlash around the woke warning began to simmer, Evita introduced a twist, one that had never been done before in any major production of the musical. In the middle of the show, Rachel Zegler herself stepped out onto a real balcony, high above the crowds gathered outside the theater. Dressed in full costume, she sang "Don't Cry for Me Argentina, Live to the Street," while the paying audience inside the theater watched her performance on a screen. Yes, you heard that right. Fans who spent up to £250 on premium seats at London's iconic Palladium weren't watching Zegler in person during the show's most iconic number. They were watching a live stream. Meanwhile, tourists and casual passersby on the street below got the real deal for free. At first, the moment seemed magical, a tribute to the real Eva Perón's historic addresses from the balcony. Social media lit up with clips of Zegler waving down to the crowd, her voice echoing through the street. It looked cinematic, historic, but inside the theater, it was a different story. Almost instantly, fans who paid top dollar began posting furious reactions online. One person wrote, "Pay 200 quid to see a projection? What a joke." Another added, "Why are the people outside getting the star experience while we're stuck watching a screen?" The sentiment spread fast. The balcony moment, while bold in concept, ended up feeling like a bait-and switch. Critics pointed out the optics. Why remove the emotional climax of the show from the people who actually paid to be there? Why turn it into a viral street moment instead of a shared theatrical experience? Some believed the move wasn't about art at all, but about Rachel Zegler, that it was engineered to go viral, to flood TikTok with fan-shot angles and paint Zegler as a woman of the people. One comment summed it up best: "This wasn't Evita, this was influencer theater." Still, a few defended the idea, saying it brought Eva's legacy to the public in a bold, literal way. But the damage was done. Fans inside felt cheated. Critics outside saw through the spectacle. And as the reviews started to roll in, the backlash only got worse. To understand the backlash Zegler faced with Evita, you have to look at the storm that's been building around her for years. Rachel Zegler burst onto the scene as Hollywood's next big thing, handpicked by Steven Spielberg to lead his West Side Story remake. At just 17, she was hailed as a prodigy, the kind of fresh, diverse, socially conscious face the industry had been searching for. But the glow didn't last long. After her breakout role, Zegler was cast in the controversial live-action Snow White remake. That's when things took a turn. Instead of celebrating the role, she made headlines by tearing down the original. In one now infamous interview, she called the 1937 film weird and dated, and said Prince Charming was a guy who literally stalks her. Her comments went viral for all the wrong reasons. Disney fans, feminists, and even neutral audiences accused her of disrespecting legacy while promoting a soulless rebrand. The backlash was so intense, some speculated Disney considered shelving the film entirely. It didn't end there. Zegler's reputation as a girl boss gone rogue began to snowball. From red carpet quotes calling herself the future of feminism to behind-the-scenes rumors of diva behavior, the narrative shifted. What started as admiration turned into criticism. Audiences began to see her not as a grounded rising star, but as someone out of touch, a manufactured icon trying too hard to appear relatable. And so, when Evita was announced, many already had their minds made up. They weren't coming to see a reinvention. They were coming to see if the girl who lectured audiences about outdated fairy tales could carry one of theater's most iconic roles. Expectations were high, but patience was low. The moment anything felt off, the knives came out. That's the danger of being a lightning rod. Every word, every choice, every quote gets magnified. And in Rachel's case, her past controversies didn't just follow her into the theater. They filled the seats before she even stepped on stage. For many fans, Evita wasn't just another performance. It was a test she may have already failed before the curtain even rose. Once the dust from opening night settled, critics and fans alike were left asking one question: was Evita bold and brilliant, or a total disaster? Because depending on who you asked, Rachel Zegler's performance was either the highlight of the season or one of the most misguided interpretations of Eva Peron ever staged. Let's start with the praise. There were those who lauded Zegler's vocals as flawless and unshakable. Some described her presence as commanding, her confidence palpable, and her emotional range surprisingly deep. For defenders, the stripped-down production allowed Zegler's raw talent to shine. They claimed it was a gutsy move, removing the traditional flash and spectacle in favor of minimalism and message. But then came the other side, the much louder, more relentless wave of criticism. Many called the show soulless, accusing it of stripping all the life, romance, and visual majesty out of Evita. One review labeled the set design as a blank box with a balcony and called Zegler's performance hollow cosplay. Another slammed the entire production as TikTok theater, designed for clips, not substance. The biggest complaints didn't just target Rachel. They aimed at director Jamie Lloyd's decision to remove all glamour from the staging. Gone were the lavish costumes, the sweeping set changes, the emotional crescendos. In their place, bare scaffolding, floodlights, and a single balcony. Critics said it robbed the story of its soul, that the emotional core of Eva Peron's journey was drowned in abstraction and performance art. Audience reactions mirrored this divide. Some stood up for standing ovations, others walked out. Many of those who stayed described feeling confused, disconnected, or even misled. One viral comment read, "This wasn't a reinvention, it was a dissection, and it killed the heart of the show." But perhaps the most damaging critique wasn't from any official review. It came from the fans themselves. The same people who once celebrated Zegler's rise. Their voices filled forums and flooded comment sections, accusing the production of being more interested in virtue signaling than storytelling. For all the outrage, the show trended. The clips went viral, which led many to ask, was this the plan all along? What came next suggests it might have been. While fans argued and critics raged, one thing became clear. Evita was dominating the headlines. Every quote, every clip, every backlash-laced review only made the show trend harder. And that's when some started asking the uncomfortable question, was all of this actually the plan? Because from a PR standpoint, the rollout was flawless. The woke warning generated outrage before the curtains even opened. The balcony stunt delivered viral visuals tailor-made for social media. And Rachel Zegler, already infamous for her off-screen controversies, became the face of a show that, whether you loved or hated it, everyone was suddenly talking about. Some observers pointed out how perfectly the controversy played into modern engagement strategies. The production wasn't relying on 5-star reviews or glowing playbills. It was relying on virality, on outrage, on people arguing in the comments, stitching clips on TikTok, and reposting photos of Zegler waving from the Palladium balcony like a modern Eva Peron. Critics of the production accused director Jamie Lloyd of prioritizing message over meaning, that the minimalism wasn't artistic, it was cost-saving, that the stripped-back visuals weren't profound, they were lazy. And worst of all, that the political overtones were a distraction from the fact that the emotional substance had been drained out of the story. But others saw it differently. They argued that Evita had always been political, that retelling the rise of a working-class woman who turned herself into a myth demanded bold choices. They praised Zegler's willingness to take risks, to shed the glamour, and to make people uncomfortable. After all, isn't that what Eva Peron did? Still, even those sympathetic to the production had to admit, it all felt incredibly calculated. The woke warning, the bare-bones set, the balcony, the casting of Zegler, a figure already at the center of cultural war discourse, nothing felt random. Everything felt intentional. And that's where the debate truly ignited. Was this brilliant marketing or performative nonsense? A radical artistic reinvention or a desperate attempt to cover a weak script with controversy? The truth likely sits somewhere in between. Just as fans were starting to digest the whirlwind of controversy surrounding the show's execution, a new twist began circulating online. One that suggested the entire balcony performance may not have been as noble or spontaneous as it looked. According to alleged crew whispers and anonymous theater gossip accounts, the now iconic balcony moment wasn't a creative decision from the director. It was pushed by Rachel Zegler herself. The reason? Image repair. Insiders claim Zegler was furious after early walkouts and hostile fan reactions. Rather than issue a public statement or shift the production's tone, she reportedly insisted on doing something big. Something that would go viral, soften public perception, and show her as someone for the people. And so the idea was born. She would step onto the balcony live in costume, waving to the public, just like Eva Peron had done decades ago, a clever echo of history, but with cameras rolling. But here, where it gets darker. One anonymous backstage source, whose claims remain unverified, alleges that Zegler didn't refer to the people below as adoring fans or fellow citizens. She called them the losers. As in, let's do it on the balcony for the losers outside, at least they'll get to see me for a little while. The quote quickly made the rounds on Reddit and TikTok, with duets reacting in disbelief and anger. Zegler's defenders called it fake, a smear. But others weren't so sure. They pointed to her past interviews, her tone-deaf comments during the Snow White press tour, and her sometimes cold demeanor toward criticism. Whether or not the quote was real almost didn't matter anymore. The idea felt believable, and that alone was enough to fuel outrage. Some even began to speculate that the entire show had become a calculated machine, a Trojan horse wrapped in political messaging, hiding a desperate PR campaign to redeem Zegler's public image. The warning signs, the balcony wave, the heavy-handed symbolism. Was this still theater, or was it performance in service of brand repair? Whatever the truth was behind the scenes, one thing was undeniable. The crowd wasn't buying the illusion, and the backlash brewing against so-called woke theater was now locked onto its newest symbol. And Zegler, she was right in the middle of it. What started as criticism of one performance quickly snowballed into something much bigger. Suddenly, it wasn't just about Evita. It wasn't even just about Rachel Zegler. The show had become the lightning rod for a growing cultural backlash, a backlash aimed squarely at what many now call woke theater. Across forums, comment sections, and late-night reaction videos, frustrated fans began voicing a shared sentiment. That modern theater was losing its soul, that powerful stories were being gutted in favor of political messaging, abstract symbolism, and heavy-handed virtue signaling. And to many, Evita was the perfect example. A story once filled with grandeur, romance, and tragic ambition was now being performed inside a gray box with a warning sign. Theater should be dangerous, cried traditionalists, artists, even casual fans, rallying behind quotes like McKellen's. They mocked the sensory warning, they slammed the barebones set, and they ridiculed the balcony moment as influencer fluff. A moment not designed to move hearts but to earn views. The debate wasn't subtle. It was loud, aggressive, and personal. TikTok creators posted side-by-side comparisons of past Evita productions versus Zegler's version, pointing out how stripped it had become. On Reddit, entire threads dissected the political choices baked into the show. And on X, hashtags like #WokeEvita and refund Zegler started trending in bursts. But this backlash didn't exist in a vacuum. It was tied to a broader fatigue many feel with modern entertainment, films, shows, even books being reimagined not to deepen meaning, but to push messages. Some call it progress, others call it pandering. And Evita found itself dropped into the center of that war. Zegler, whether she wanted to or not, had become the face of that conversation. To one side, she was a brave, progressive performer willing to challenge the norms of outdated theater. To the other, she was the perfect example of what happens when legacy, depth, and storytelling are sacrificed for shallow buzz. Either way, one thing was clear. The crowd wasn't quiet, and the theater world had just been reminded that audiences, especially the ones paying £250 a ticket, are paying attention closely. In the wake of Evita's opening, Rachel Zegler finds herself at a crossroads, one that could define the rest of her career. For some, this backlash will pass, another news cycle, another controversy, and the noise fades. But for others, the damage might be more permanent. Because Evita wasn't just a play, it was a spotlight, and it revealed everything the public had been waiting to judge. Zegler was supposed to be untouchable. A Spielberg discovery, a Disney princess, a symbol of modern talent fused with Gen Z sensibilities. But after West Side Story underperformed, after Snow White became a culture war punching bag, and now with Evita stirring division in the heart of theater culture, that image is cracking. Producers may see her as too risky, fans are already divided, and even those who support her artistry admit her public presence often overshadows the performance. She's not just an actress anymore, she's a symbol, and not always the one she wants to be. But here's the twist. Controversy doesn't always destroy careers. Sometimes it builds them. Sometimes the backlash becomes the brand. Some believe Zegler might lean into the chaos, double down, and embrace her role as the face of this cultural battleground. After all, what's more captivating than a celebrity who seems to thrive amidst public outcry? What do you think this tumultuous opening night means for Rachel Zegler's future in Hollywood and on stage?